human rights in the United States. Pretty much what I'm going to accomplish here is kind of give you a timeline of some historical developments of different rights across all different things, political, labor, land, everything like that. And I'm going to give you a little bit of give you a timeline here too, and go over some things that took quite a while to develop in the U.S. So first we can go and start off in the beginning, and we'll start at the very beginning. In 1776, the Declaration of Independence was drafted, and a quote from that is, "All men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights." So we can look at that. That's kind of one of the first big documentations, paperwork out there saying everybody has certain rights, everybody has things we can't take away from them. The next we'll go to 1791, which is the Bill of Rights. And in the Bill of Rights, it guarantees civil and political rights to individual citizens, which include things like freedom of speech, religion, association, the right to a fair trial, the probation of cruel and unusual punishment, things we take for granted today and things we use in our everyday life. Next, in 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act. Well, one reason I wanted to bring this up, I think this is a huge human rights violation on the government's part. Partly because that act led to the forced relocation of some 70,000 Native Americans. Many of those Native Americans even died on the trails. Have you heard the Trail of Tears? I'm sure we all remember that. And this is just something I found kind of interesting and just a little bit disturbing almost. So next we move to 1848, which was the Seneca Falls Declaration, and I'll come back to that here in just a second. And next we can move on to 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation. Of course, we all remember this. This is when slaves were starting to give rights. They were all freed. Now, notice how this is, almost this is almost 90 years after the Declaration of Independence, where all men are created equal. Well, until this point, slaves were not equal. They didn't have any of the rights that the educated white man has. So we can see it's taken almost 90 to almost 100 years for people to kind of start getting similar human rights. Because it was a huge event where they had 100 women and men sign the Declaration proclaiming equal social, civil, and religious rights for women. So this is kind of, in my opinion at least, what starts to mark the beginning of everybody gets human rights. It's not just men that get this and that. This is for women as well. So this is kind of a big cornerstone. This was some 70 years after the Declaration of Independence where we can see rights starting to kind of get trickled and pushed onto everybody. So next we can go to the growing years. This is when we're going through world wars, we had an industrial revolution, and America was changing very rapidly in several ways. So first, 1933, the New Deal. So this is right when we had the Great Depression, and this is when FDR launched the New Deal. And in this New Deal, one thing I really want to touch was child labor. He banned child labor, legalized trade union practice, and also established Social Security. Now, these are things that was quite common back then, but things we find that no one does today. So this really set the foundation for how we work and act today in a couple different ways. And then, of course, in 1945, the United Nations is formed. I'll go into a little bit more detail with them here in just a minute. 1948, the American Declaration of Rights. Well, this is actually the American Declaration of Rights of Men and the Universal Declarations of Human Rights are adopted. So this is two things that the United States worked very hard on. They were leading drafts, and really heading both these documents, trying to get human rights more standardized, per se. A little bit about them. Well, they are a huge organization that's uh, promoted to uh, so the United Nations is one of its purposes is promoting and encouraging respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms for all. So the United States has been a huge instrument in trying to get the United Nations rolling and helping them enforce what they do today. So next we're into the recent years. So 1992, the U.S. ratified the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. In 2002, the U.S. began using a detention camp in Guantanamo Bay, which is kind of a human rights violation per se, just because they used to use this area to hold terrorism suspects in custody without trial, and most of those people spend all their lives there. And then one recently here that we should all be familiar with, gay marriage was legalized, which this was a huge step forward on a national level just because uh, same-sex marriages have been illegal and not recognized in most places across the U.S. and is a big step in us coming together and human rights evolving as a whole. I was able to give you a little bit of information about some major human rights events and how the U.S. has changed over all these years and is continuing to grow. Have a nice day.